The fluorescent lights of the courtroom hummed, a dull counterpoint to the pounding in my chest. My stomach churned with a nauseous blend of anger and anticipation. 11 years. 11 years I'd poured my lifeblood into Thompson Technologies, watching it grow from a scrappy startup to a multi-million-dollar enterprise. And for what? To be discarded like yesterday's news. Mr. Thompson, Judge Mallory's voice cut through the sterile air. Are you ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. My lawyer, Ms. Ramirez, gave me a reassuring nod. She was a force of nature in a tailored pantsuit, and I desperately needed her strength right now. Across the aisle, Richard Harding, CEO of Thompson Technologies and the man who orchestrated my downfall, smirked. He leaned back in his chair, the picture of arrogant indifference. My jaw clenched. Mr. Harding, Judge Mallory addressed him, does the defense maintain its position? Harding's smirk widened. Absolutely, Your Honor. Mr. Thompson's termination was a necessary business decision. We needed fresh perspectives. The words, the very phrase they'd used to justify my dismissal, sent a fresh wave of fury through me. Fresh perspectives, I scoffed, unable to contain myself. That's code for steal his work and push him out before he realizes it. Order. Judge Mallory banged her gavel. Mr. Thompson, you will address the court through your counsel. Ms. Ramirez placed a calming hand on my arm. Your Honor, my client contends that his termination was not only unjust but part of a larger scheme to defraud him of his rightful compensation for the groundbreaking software he developed. For Thompson Technologies, Harding's lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Mr. Caldwell, rose to his feet. Your Honor, this is absurd. Mr. Thompson was adequately compensated for his work. He received a generous severance package, a $5,000 bonus, after 11 years of building their entire platform. I muttered under my breath, loud enough for several heads to turn in my direction. Ms. Ramirez shot me a warning glance. Judge Mallory sighed. Mr. Thompson, I understand this is a difficult situation, but courtroom outbursts will not be tolerated. My apologies, Your Honor, I mumbled, forcing myself to remain silent. The injustice of it all clawed at me. I'd poured my heart and soul into that company, working late nights, weekends, even holidays, to build the very foundation of their success. And they tossed me aside with a pittance, claiming I lacked vision. The hearing continued with a tedious back-and-forth between the lawyers. Mr. Caldwell presented Thompson Technologies' carefully crafted narrative. I was a competent but ultimately replaceable employee. My performance had slipped. My skills were becoming outdated. They needed someone with fresh perspectives to take them into the future. Lies, all lies. I knew the truth. I'd stumbled upon it accidentally a few weeks after my termination. While clearing out my old email account, I discovered a hidden folder on the company server, a folder I hadn't known existed. It contained confidential documents detailing the impending sale of a new software platform, a platform built almost entirely on the code I developed, code I'd never been properly compensated for. They'd used my work, my innovation, to secure a multi-million-dollar deal, and then discarded me like an empty coffee cup. A $5,000 bonus, that's not enough for a decade of stolen code. Ms. Ramirez skillfully chipped away at their narrative, presenting evidence of my consistently positive performance reviews, the long hours I'd worked, and the crucial role I'd played in the company's growth. But without the smoking gun, without concrete proof of their conspiracy, it felt like an uphill battle. Mr. Harding, Ms. Ramirez asked during cross-examination, can you explain why Mr. Thompson's severance package was so modest, considering his significant contributions to the company? Harding shifted uncomfortably in his seat. As I stated earlier, Mr. Thompson was adequately compensated. The severance package was standard for his position. Standard, Ms. Ramirez pressed, for an employee who essentially built your company's core technology. Objection, Mr. Caldwell interjected. Counsel is speculating. Sustained, Judge Mallory said. Ms. Ramirez, rephrase your question. The dance continued, a frustratingly slow waltz around the truth. My frustration grew with each passing minute. I wanted to scream, to jump across the table and shake the truth out of Harding. But I knew I couldn't. I had to trust Ms. Ramirez. I had to play the game, follow the rules, even though they felt rigged against me. The courtroom clock ticked, each second an eternity. The air grew thick with unspoken tension. I could feel the weight of Harding's smug gaze on me, a constant reminder of the betrayal, the injustice. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd gotten away with it. He was wrong. He had no idea what was coming. Your Honor, Ms. Ramirez said, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. We request a brief recess to present new evidence. She turned to me, a subtle flicker of triumph in her eyes. My heart leapt. This was it. The turning point. The beginning of the end for Richard Harding and his carefully constructed web of lies. The game was on. The smell of sawdust and varnish still clings to that memory, sharp and bitter like the taste of unfairness. I was 10, maybe 11, small for my age but bursting with the kind of nervous energy that only comes from wanting to prove yourself. My older brother, Mark, 2 years my senior and already sporting the beginnings of a condescending smirk that would become his trademark, lounged against the workbench in our dad's garage. He held it like it was his throne, a kingdom built of tools and half-finished projects. Almost done, Dad? Mark asked, his voice dripping with a casual confidence I envied. He was talking about the Pinewood Derby car they'd been working on for weeks, a sleek, aerodynamic bullet of a car painted a vibrant, arrogant red. My own car, a clumsy, boxy thing I'd painstakingly carved and painted myself, sat forlornly on a shelf nearby. It was a deep, mournful blue, a color I'd chosen because it reminded me of the vast, lonely sky. Dad, his brow furrowed in concentration, adjusted a tiny screw on Mark's car. Just a few more tweaks, he murmured, not even glancing my way. This one's going to be a winner. My stomach tightened. Weeks I'd spent, hunched over my own car, sanding, painting, trying to make it perfect. Dad had offered a few cursory pointers, a distracted "that's nice, David," but his attention, his real enthusiasm, had always been reserved for Mark's project. Can I help, Dad? I asked, my voice small, hoping for a sliver of the attention he lavished on my brother. He looked up, a flicker of impatience in his eyes. Not now, David. I'm almost finished with Mark's car. We need to get this right. The words stung, a familiar burn. It wasn't just about the car. It was about everything. Mark, the athletic one, the charming one, the one who effortlessly excelled at everything he touched. And me, David Thompson, the quiet one, the one who always seemed to be striving, reaching, and falling short. But mine, I started, my voice catching in my throat. Yours is fine, David, Dad said, his tone dismissive. Just let it be. I retreated to the corner of the garage, the smell of sawdust and varnish suddenly suffocating. I picked up my car, tracing the lines of the clumsy body with my finger. It was heavy in my hand, a symbol of my inadequacy. Don't worry, Squirt, Mark said, his smirk widening. You can always try again next year. He winked at Dad, a shared moment of amusement at my expense. The next day, at the Pinewood Derby, the humiliation was complete. Mark's car, a blur of red, effortlessly zipped down the track, winning heat after heat. My car, the lonely blue underdog, lumbered along, eventually finishing dead last. I stood there, watching, a knot of shame tightening in my chest. My dad clapped and cheered for Mark, his face beaming with pride. He barely acknowledged my existence. I remember the way my throat ached, the way my eyes burned with inch tears. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, to become invisible. It wasn't just about losing the race. It was about the feeling of being unseen, unheard, unimportant. It was about the realization that, in my father's eyes, I would always be second best. That feeling, that burning ember of resentment, stayed with me. It simmered beneath the surface, shaping me, driving me. Even years later, after I'd built a successful career in IT, the memory of that Pinewood Derby, the sting of my father's indifference, remained. It fueled my ambition, my relentless drive to prove myself, to finally earn the recognition I craved. And now, here I am, sitting in this sterile conference room, facing a panel of executives who have just fired me, David Thompson, for fresh perspectives. They want to steal my work, my code. The very thing I poured my heart and soul into, the thing I thought would finally validate me. They think they can erase me, just like my father did all those years ago. They think they can get away with it, but they're wrong. They have no idea what I'm capable of. They have no idea the lengths I'll go to get what I deserve. They underestimated me, just like my father did. Mr. Thompson, the CEO, a portly man with a condescending smile that mirrored my brother's, said smoothly, "We appreciate your years of service. We're offering you a generous severance package." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, I knew, was a paltry sum, an insult disguised as a reward. A $5,000 bonus. That's not enough for a decade of stolen code. I looked at him, my face impassive. Inside, though, the embers of that old resentment were flaring into a raging fire. I'll consider your offer, I said, my voice calm, steady. But my eyes, I knew, held a different message, a message of cold, calculated fury. They didn't know it yet, but their game was about to change, my game. Flashback underscored to the fluorescent lights of the server room hummed a monotonous tune, a soundtrack to countless late nights I'd spent building the digital backbone of Navatech. I ran a hand through my hair, the faint scent of burnt coffee clinging to my fingertips. Another all-nighter, but this wasn't the usual pre-launch crunch. This was different. This was unease. It started with a flicker on my monitor, a fleeting glimpse of an unauthorized access attempt. Just a blip, easily dismissed, but then another, and another. All originating from the executive floor. Damn it, I muttered, adjusting my glasses. I swiveled in my chair, the worn leather groaning in protest. My gut churned. This wasn't some random glitch. This was targeted. This was personal. Everything all right, David? Mark, one of the junior sysadmins, poked his head into the server room. He looked concerned, clutching a half-eaten sandwich in one hand. He was a good kid, eager to learn, always willing to pull his weight. A stark contrast to the vultures circling on the executive floor. Yeah, fine, I lied, forcing a smile. Just a few gremlins in the system. Nothing I can't handle, Mark nodded, seemingly reassured. Okay, cool. Just checking. Let me know if you need anything. He disappeared back into the main office, leaving me alone with my growing suspicion. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My proprietary algorithms, the ones I'd poured years of my life into developing, the very heart of Navatech's projected success, they felt exposed. I accessed the server logs, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Line after line of code scrolled past, a digital tapestry woven with my own blood, sweat, and caffeine. And then I saw it. The unmistakable digital fingerprint of John Harding, Navatech's CEO, accessing my files, unauthorized. My stomach lurched. John, my mentor, the man who'd taken me under his wing, promised me the world. The man I'd trusted implicitly. He was in my system. He was stealing my work. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. This wasn't just a breach of protocol. This was betrayal. A deep, visceral betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Why would John do this? We were a team, weren't we? I spent the next few hours poring over the logs, each new discovery twisting the knife further. It wasn't just John. It was a coordinated effort. Several executives, all accessing my files, downloading my algorithms, systematically stripping me of my intellectual property. They were planning something big, and I was being cut out. The hum of the servers seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of the empire I had built, the empire they were stealing. I felt a surge of anger, hot and raw. This wasn't just about the code. This was about my life's work. My legacy, my future. They were trying to erase me. I slammed my fist on the desk, the sound echoing through the empty server room. They can't get away with this, I growled, my voice tight with fury. They won't. I started to piece together the puzzle, the hushed meetings behind closed doors, the sudden interest in my project from venture capitalists, the whispered rumors of a lucrative buyout. It was all coming into focus now. They were planning to sell my work, to cash in on my genius, leaving me with nothing, a $5,000 bonus. That's not enough for a decade of stolen code, I muttered, the words laced with venom. The paltry bonus they'd offered me for my contributions now felt like a slap in the face, a cruel joke. I thought about confronting John, about demanding answers, about exposing their treachery, but a chilling realization washed over me. They had the power, they had the money, they had the connections. And I had nothing but the truth. And in their world, truth was a commodity, easily manipulated, easily silenced. I knew then that a direct confrontation would be futile. They would deny everything. They would discredit me. They would bury me. I needed a different approach. A smarter approach. I needed to play their game. And I needed to win. I spent the rest of the night formulating my plan, the anger fueling my focus. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I would expose them. I would reclaim what was rightfully mine, and I would make them pay. The first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the server room. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but resolute. The hum of the servers no longer sounded like a mockery. It sounded like a promise of retribution, a promise of revenge. The game was on, and I was just getting started. I stared at the lukewarm coffee in my hand, the bitter taste mirroring the churning in my gut. "He actually said fresh perspectives?" Luis asked, his voice a low rumble. The fluorescent lights of the diner buzzed overhead, a stark contrast to the dimness gathering outside. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Fresh perspectives," I repeated, the words like acid on my tongue. 11 years I built their network, their entire damn system, and they tossed me aside like yesterday's news. Luis, my former colleague, a man I'd mentored and trusted, reached across the sticky table and squeezed my shoulder. "David Thompson, you deserve better than this." His words, though kind, offered little comfort. The injustice of it all gnawed at me. I had poured my heart and soul into Novatech, sacrificing evenings, weekends, even family time, to ensure the company's success. And for what? A paltry severance package and a condescending pat on the back. "It's not just the firing, Luis," I finally admitted, lifting my gaze to meet his. "It's the theft. They're using my code, my algorithms, the very architecture I designed, to finalize the deal with Omnicorp. A deal that will make them millions." I had meticulously documented everything, every line of code, every late-night breakthrough, every innovative solution I'd implemented. It was all there, buried within the company's servers, a digital testament to my stolen legacy. Luis's eyebrows shot up. "They're stealing your work." That's criminal, David." He leaned back, the gears in his mind visibly turning. "You have proof?" I nodded, tapping my laptop bag resting beside me. "Everything. Timestamps, version histories, the whole 9 yards. I even have emails where I outlined the core concepts to Peterson, months before he even brought in that so-called consultant who now magically has all the answers." The consultant, a slick, overconfident young man named Ethan Bell, was nothing more than a puppet, a face for Peterson to hide behind. He parroted my ideas in meetings, presenting them as his own, while I sat there, silenced by the terms of my non-disclosure agreement. The irony wasn't lost on me, my own work being used as a weapon against me. "So what are you going to do?" Luis asked, his voice laced with a mixture of concern and anticipation. I took a deep breath, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I could walk away, take the severance, and try to start over. But the thought of them profiting from my hard work, my ingenuity, was a bitter pill I couldn't swallow. "They tried to erase me. Game on." A grim smile touched my lips. "I'm going to expose them, Luis. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." The diner's fluorescent hum seemed to intensify, a soundtrack to the brewing storm. Luis leaned closer, his eyes gleaming with a newfound intensity. "How?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I opened my laptop, the familiar glow illuminating my face. "Remember that failsafe I built into the system, the one for emergency data recovery?" Luis nodded, his eyes widening in understanding. "The one Peterson thought was too expensive to implement." I grinned, a flicker of satisfaction warming the cold knot in my stomach. "He's about to find out just how valuable it is." I explained my plan, the details unfolding like a carefully crafted blueprint. The failsafe, designed to protect the company's data in the event of a catastrophic failure, could also be used to expose their deception. It allowed me to access and manipulate key data streams, effectively controlling the flow of information within the system. "You can use it to rewrite the narrative?" Luis asked, his voice hushed with awe. I nodded. "Not rewrite, Luis. Reveal." "I'm going to reveal the truth." My plan was intricate, requiring precise timing and a deep understanding of the system's architecture. But I was confident. I knew every nook and cranny of that network, every line of code, every hidden pathway. It was my creation, after all. We spent the next few hours huddled over my laptop, fine-tuning the plan, anticipating potential roadblocks, and ensuring every detail was accounted for. The diner slowly emptied around us, the clatter of dishes and the murmur of conversations fading into the background. We were in our own world, a world of code, algorithms, and the sweet taste of impending retribution. "It's risky, David," Luis cautioned, breaking the silence. "Peterson is ruthless. He'll stop at nothing to protect himself." I knew he was right. Peterson was a shark, a man who had clawed his way to the top and wouldn't hesitate to crush anyone who threatened his position. But I wasn't afraid. I had nothing left to lose. I know the risks, I said, meeting Luce's gaze. But I also know the system. I built it. And I can dismantle it just as easily. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me, replacing the exhaustion and despair with a sense of purpose. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had been wronged, betrayed, and discarded. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I was going to fight back. I'm with you, David, Luis said, his voice firm. All the way. His words were a balm to my wounded spirit. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had an ally, someone who believed in me, someone who saw the injustice and was willing to stand with me against the tide. Thanks, Luis, I said, a genuine smile finally breaking through the facade of weariness. I appreciate that. We finalized the details of our plan, making sure every contingency was covered. The first step was to gain access to the Omnicorp presentation, the culmination of months of deceit and stolen intellectual property. I needed to insert my evidence, the undeniable proof of my authorship, into the very heart of their fraudulent triumph. The clock was ticking. The presentation was scheduled for the following day, and we had less than 24 hours to execute our plan. The night stretched before us, a daunting yet exhilarating challenge. I had spent 11 years building their empire. Now, it was time to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The $5,000 bonus they offered as a parting gift was a slap in the face, an insult to my dedication and expertise. But it was also a motivator, a constant reminder of the injustice I was fighting against. I wasn't just doing this for myself. I was doing it for every hard-working individual who had ever been cheated, betrayed, and discarded by a system that valued profit over people. And I wouldn't stop until justice was served. The courtroom buzzed, a low hum of anticipation. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drummer keeping time with the ticking clock on the wall. I watched as Derek, my supposed friend and now my sworn enemy, squirmed under the judge's piercing gaze. He adjusted his tie, a nervous tick I'd witnessed countless times during our years working together, only now it held a different significance. It was the twitch of a cornered animal. Mr. Thompson, the judge addressed me, his voice cutting through the murmur. You may proceed. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, clutching the flash drive that contained the key to my revenge, the key to exposing the truth. Your Honor, members of the jury, I stand before you today not just as a wronged employee, but as a victim of a calculated conspiracy. My gaze swept across the faces in the courtroom, landing on Derek's ashen visage. For 11 years, I dedicated my life to Innovate Technologies. I poured my heart and soul into building their systems, their security, their very foundation. I was promised partnership, a share in the success I helped create. I paused, letting the weight of those words hang in the air. Instead, I was fired for fresh perspectives. A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. My lawyer, Miss Carter, gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. I was offered a paltry $5,000 severance package, a slap in the face for over a decade of unwavering loyalty. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have anticipated, is that my dedication extended beyond their limited understanding. I built their empire, and they tried to erase me. Game on. I plugged the flash drive into the courtroom's computer. The screen flickered to life, displaying lines of code, emails, and financial records. This, Your Honor, is the proof. The evidence that Derek, along with CEO Richard Harding, orchestrated my dismissal to steal my proprietary software. The very software they are currently negotiating to sell to Omnicorp for millions. The courtroom erupted. Derek's face drained of all color. Harding, sitting in the gallery, shot up from his seat, sputtering denials. The judge banged his gavel, restoring order, but the damage was done. The truth, like a virus I had carefully coded into their system, was spreading, infecting their meticulously crafted facade of innocence. Ms. Carter smoothly took over, presenting a meticulously documented case, each piece of evidence a nail in their coffin. She detailed how Derek had systematically copied my work, how Harding had approved the fraudulent sale, how they had both benefited from my forced departure. The trial stretched on for days, a grueling ordeal of testimonies and cross-examinations. The prosecution tried to discredit me, painting me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. They brought up past performance reviews, minor infractions, anything to cast doubt on my character, but I held firm. I recounted my years of dedication, the long nights, the missed holidays, all in service of a company that ultimately betrayed me. I recalled a specific incident from my childhood, a memory that had fueled my resolve throughout this ordeal. My younger brother, always the favored child, had broken my prized model airplane. He'd feigned innocence, and my parents, blinded by their preference, had punished me for accusing him. That feeling of injustice, of being silenced and disregarded, had stayed with me, a bitter reminder of the unfairness that existed in the world. But now, I was finally reclaiming my voice. I also relived the moment Derek had delivered the news of my termination. We were at lunch, a supposed celebration of a recent project success. He had patted my back, praised my contributions, and then, with a chillingly casual tone, informed me that my services were no longer required. The memory of that betrayal, the knife twist of his feigned camaraderie, fueled my determination to expose his deceit. The tide began to turn when a key witness, a former Innovate employee, stepped forward. He testified to witnessing Derek copying my files, corroborating my claims. It was the twist I had been hoping for, the final piece of the puzzle that solidified my case. And now, here in the courtroom, the payoff was at hand. The jury delivered their verdict, guilty on all counts. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Derek and Harding stared blankly ahead, their faces masks of disbelief. The judge announced the sentencing, significant prison time for both men, and a court order mandating Innovate Technologies to compensate me for my stolen work and emotional distress. But it didn't end there. The deal with Omnicorp collapsed, their reputation tarnished by the scandal. Innovate's stock plummeted, their future uncertain, but for me, the victory was complete. It wasn't just about the money, although the substantial settlement certainly provided a sense of vindication. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, about exposing the truth, about proving that integrity and hard work ultimately prevail. As I walked out of the courtroom, the setting sun casting long shadows across the steps, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. The weight of the past had lifted, replaced by a sense of quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served. My revenge, carefully coded and meticulously executed, had finally reached its payoff. The empire they tried to build on my stolen work had crumbled, and I, David Thompson, was finally free.